Thank you for being with us, America. We're glad you're here. Open phones at 888-825-5225. You jump in. We'll talk about your life and your money. We're talking about index funds going into the break versus mutual funds. Just give you a little bit more on that because there's a lot of barking out there that, you know, you don't need an investment advisor. You can just pick a mutual fund, and most mutual funds don't outperform the S&P 500, which actually is a true statement. Most don't. But that doesn't mean all don't. Most people don't win the Super Bowl, but someone does. And so which team do you want to pick, you know? So here's the thing. Over the last 40 years, large cap funds that are in existence today that we own that are around 40 years old, there's 84 of them. 34 in the growth category that have outperformed the S&P 500. And actually, I'm sorry, out of the 84, 30 of them outperformed the S&P 500. In the last 30 years, there's 179 total. 51 of them outperformed the S&P 500. In the last 20 years, there's 446 funds available in that population growth. We did the research on this. How many outperformed out of 446 the S&P 500? 199. And in the last 10 years, there's 957, basically 1,000 of them, and somewhere around a fourth of them, 247, outperformed the S&P 500. In my current mix, in my personal 401k, my return over the last 40 years, had I been in it exactly like that, I've not been in it the whole time like that, but if I bought those exact funds over the last 40 years, they would have returned 13.04% as a group. And I've got one growth in income, one aggressive growth, and one international. So I made 13.04 during a 40-year average. The S&P during that same period of time averaged 11.81. So while 1.23%, 1.25% over 40 years might not seem like a lot, if an investor puts $10,000 in 40 years ago and never puts anything else in, this amount grows to $480,000 extra during that 40 years because of 1.25%. So returns do matter. And so had you done, I'm just going to invest in S&P because I read an article, I would have made $500,000 more for every $10,000 that I had invested 40 years ago than you made. That's what outperforming the market means to you. Over the last 30 years, my mix has averaged 11.3%. The S&P has averaged 10.89. Over the last 20 years, my mix has averaged 8.53, and the S&P has averaged 7.12. Of course, this includes the drop in 2008 in those numbers. So once we get past those numbers, it's going to change dramatically because there's an unusual dip in the marketplace and the historical data of the marketplace there. I own one particular mutual fund that since its inception in 1973, and I've owned it almost that long, has averaged 13.43%. During the 44 years I've been invested in that, had I been in it since it began, not quite, but had I been in it since it began, out of 44 years, it's had 7 years it lost money. The oldest fund out there is ICA, Investment Company of America. I actually own some of it. Its annual return since it started in 1934 is 12.07%. Now, Dave Ramsey says you can get 12%. Dave Ramsey's lost his mind. I trust Dave Ramsey for getting out of debt, but he doesn't know anything about investing because you can't get 12%. You just bought that one fund, you would have. And out of the 83 years that it's been open, 15 of them are down years and the rest are up. That's a pretty stable fund. like very stable, like safer than your house fund. So there's two funds that I own right there. One at 13.43 since 1973 and one averaging 12.07 since 1934. So I know you don't think you can get 12%, and I know some of you that are CFPs know where you can get this, and others of you that are CFPs are just certified financial Pharisees because you have decided that it is absurd to expect these kinds of rates of return that the historical market data shows you is actually there. So, what if you put money in the mutual fund and I'm wrong? Well, I'm going with you for one thing because I've got millions and millions and millions of dollars in these funds. So I'm going to lose a lot more than you, so shut up. But let's just say that I'm wrong. That the fund that averaged 12% since 1934 or 13.43% since 1973, that they don't do that well. Let's say they do half as good. Now, based on their history, that would be a bizarre freaking assumption. Mathematically, you'd have to be smoking crack to get these things to do that. But let's just say they did half, because we're so far off in dreamland. Where is it you're going to get 7% on your money again? Half. 6% on your money? Have you been to the bank? Have you looked at CDs? They're 1. 1.25. Where is it you're going to get 7? So if I'm half wrong, you're still going to get wealthy. The point is for you to start investing and quit getting paralysis of the analysis. And stop this stupidity of worrying and fretting about being ripped off on fees. You know, the ASPPA, the Actuary Consultants, Administrators, and Other Retirement Plan Professionals, it's actually an organization, did a detailed research of retirement success that models the findings that we found as we studied millionaires. You know what the primary driver of becoming wealthy at retirement is? According to this study, the primary driver, 74% of the reason that people have wealth at retirement is what's called savings rate. You want me to define that for you? It means you saved money. You put money into the account. The primary contributor, the primary reason that you become wealthy is you actually freaking save money. It's not your rate of return, which I just went over, some great rates of return. And it's not that you saved on expenses. And it's not that your golfing buddy gave you a stock tip or your fishing buddy gave you a stock tip. The primary driver, 74% of the reason, if you want to be successful, 74% of the time you will be successful. That's a very high rate. It is based on you actually saving money. The rate at which you save money is the primary driver. It's not the rate of return. It's not a financial advisor or not a financial advisor. It's not you read an internet article. It's not your broke brother-in-law's opinion. You actually saved money. The rate at which you save money causes you to become wealthy. Duh! It's kind of common sense, isn't it? Well, you can't get 12%, Dave. I know. I just told you a fund where there's done that since 1934 and another one that did better than that since 1973, but I know you can't. And the S&P during that same period of time is 11.8. So, come on, folk. You can do what you want to do, but it's time to get your rate of saving, your rate of investing up, because that's the primary driver by which you become wealthy. This is the Dave Ramsey Show.